Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast. We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. To further this cause, we give away a product every week that will empower you to get involved in changing your life and changing our world. You can register for our weekly giveaway by subscribing at truthandliberty.net. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to receive weekly updates on guests, news, and much more. This is an interactive live cast, and we welcome your questions. To ask a question during the live cast, use the comment or chat features. Now get ready to dive into this week's topics with our hosts on location in Colorado, USA.
Welcome to the Truth and Liberty livecast. I'm Richard Harris, and I'm just so glad that you guys are tuning in tonight. We have a great show in store for you tonight. I am so blessed to have Karen Conrad hosting with us tonight. Karen is, what an amazing person she is, and she's actually one of the founders of Truth and Liberty. Used to be my boss when she worked here at the ministry. Now she's gone on to do other exploits, but she helps us host once in a while, and it's always a pleasure to have you, Karen, so I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. Great to be here, Richard. Thank you.
And our special guest tonight is the one and only Alex McFarland, and we're going to give Alex a proper introduction here in a little bit, but Alex, it's good to have you with us too.
Well, it's great to be with you guys. Thank you very much.
So if you're watching tonight on social media, we encourage you to flip over and get on our website at truthandliberty.net. And having said that, I'll pitch it over to Karen now. She's got some important announcements and information for you about how you can be a part of tonight's show.
Great. Thank you so much, Richard. This is going to be an amazing show, and we just have a few updates for you. First of all, I just want to encourage you to check out truthandliberty.net. You can actually watch this program on truthandliberty.net, but it's a 24-hour news feed. And Richard, you mentioned that I was part of the start of Truth and Liberty. It's such an honor. And part of what we were seeing is to be able to provide people with information through the lens of the Bible, through the lens of a biblical perspective. And so truthandliberty.net provides you with that. It's sort of like a one-stop shop to see what's happening. And Richard's done a great job of updating information. So here's some things that are out there right now I want to encourage you to check out. One of them is a site called truththevote.org, and it is about stopping voter fraud. And not only is it about reporting voter fraud, but it's really about being proactive and getting involved in our communities to help with the voting process. So check that out. Also, how to run for office as a Christian conservative. There's a great link out there for that. And we've updated the iVoter Guide. It's so important that we get educated and informed about the candidates, and this is a great tool for you. And also, if you need help or assistance with voting, there is a link to My Faith Votes on voting assistance. So if you're maybe homebound, you need a ride, you just need some help finding out where to vote, please go check that out. Also, one of the things that we want to mention is that Truth and Liberty live streams on Gospel Truth TV. So Andrew's got a 24/7 internet network that is some of his friends, we call it Andrew's friends and family, plus all the live streams that happen at Andrew Womack Ministries and Charis Bible College. So check that out. Go to gospeltruth.tv. We've got some events coming up here. One of them we were just visiting about before we went live is the Values Voter Summit. It's the 15th anniversary. And because of COVID this year, it is live stream only. It's usually held in Washington, D.C. So what this means is that you and I can actually take part in this summit without having to travel to Washington, D.C. And Truth and Liberty is a major sponsor. Richard, would you mind just sharing a moment on that so people understand what that event is about?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, the Values Voter Summit is sponsored by our friends at the Family Research Council. Tony Perkins is the president there. General Boykin is a vice president, and they are just a fantastic voice for God's values in our culture. Every year they have the Values Voter Summit in the fall, and it is one of the premier conservative conferences and probably the premier Christian conservative conference. And it's normally at some swanky hotel in Washington with a bunch of VIPs and all this. this, and the president often comes and speaks, or the vice president in non-election years. And I had the pleasure of going last year, and Donald Trump spoke, and it was just incredible. But this year, I think it's actually going to be even better because it's going to reach far more people. And you don't even have to pay the expensive ticket and the hotel costs. You just go online, and you can go on our website or on their website. I think we've got links up for that. Karen can share those and register for that. And if you have a minute, Karen, I'll tell folks, we, as a major sponsor, we have a breakout session in that Values Voter Summit, and this is a 1-hour segment where Andrew has a discussion with E.W. Jackson and David Barton. And I tell you, I sat in on this here in the studio, and it is one for the books. You don't want to miss this. You need to register for this conference. You will learn things you never heard before. It'll blow your mind. David Barton and E.W. Jackson are just incredible resources and amazing people. So hope everybody will register for that. It's going to be a great conference.
That's awesome. And it is on September 22nd through the 25th. And so please check it out at truthandliberty.net, or you can go to valuesvotersummit.org. And as Richard said, it's completely free. Also, we've got a conference coming up on September 24th to the 26th that is called the Identity in Christ Conference. This is going to be awesome. It's got Andrew Womack and Dwayne Sheriff, and many of you have enjoyed Dwayne. He is hilarious, just super funny, but this is such an important topic and really at the root of some of the issues that we're dealing with here in our country. So check that out at awmi.net/events. And then we've got the Ministers Conference coming up on October 5th through the 9th. And that is for licensed ministers, ordained ministers. This is going to be great. We've got Andrew speaking, Greg Moore, Pastor Bob Yandian, Dwayne Sheriff, Barry Bennett, Carrie Pickett. So if you're a minister, you can come to Charis Bible College and get refreshed. That is October 5th through the 9th. And again, register at awmi.net/events. One of our favorite things about the Truth and Liberty live stream is it's interactive. We get to hear from you and answer questions. And so one of the things we like to do each week is to provide you the opportunity to even win a prize. And so the way that you are eligible for that prize is just to simply subscribe at truthandliberty.net. If you're already on the email list, you already qualify. And last week's winner is Christine Edwards. Congratulations, Christine. You are receiving Christian Philosophy that is autographed by Andrew Womack. And this week's product, it is one of my favorite, and it's called You've Already Got It. Richard, you said the term mind-blowing before, and it's like this teaching is mind-blowing. Just to understand that everything that Jesus provided is already done. We've already got it. Amen. So again, to be eligible, just register at truthandliberty.net/subscribe. And to post your questions, if you're watching us on Truth and Liberty or awmi.net, you can just put your questions in the chat section. If you're watching us on Facebook or social media, again, we really encourage you to go to one of our platforms that we can assure you won't be interrupted. But if you're watching on Facebook, we're so happy to have you, and just enter your questions in the comment section. And if you would like to support Truth and Liberty, I'll tell you, I can't imagine a better organization in these times to support. And as Andrew and Richard have mentioned, we're a 501c4. So while our donations are not tax deductible, because we want to be free to speak forth what we believe, even in the area of politics, it is great seed to sow. And I just am confident you're going to receive a great harvest. So to become, I believe we're calling it a member with that, go to truthandliberty.net/donate. And lastly, before we get started here with our awesome guest, I want to just let you know that we've got prayer ministers standing by. We're dealing with a lot right now, everything we've gone through with the COVID and just even watching the news, just to stand strong on the word. We've got prayer ministers that want to pray with you, or if you just want to learn more about this ministry, call 719-635-1111. Okay, with that, Richard, I'll send it back to you.
Oh, thank you, Karen. That was awesome. Well, without further ado, I want to introduce our guest tonight, one of my favorite people in the world, Alex McFarland. And Alex is a scholar, an evangelist, a real pioneer for Christ. I think he has so many titles or labels, I'm not sure which one he likes the most, but he's an apologist, used to be president of Southern Evangelical Seminary, and has been on Fox News, on all kinds of television programs. One of the things in his bio that's most impressive to me is that he's preached in over 2,000 churches. So I just want to welcome you, Alex, to our show tonight. Brother, thank you for coming on. I know that it's going to be awesome.
Well, thank you guys. It's great to be on with you. And, I was just listening to all that the Lord is doing through Truth and Liberty, through the Gospel Truth Television Network, through AWMI internationally, and through Charis Bible College. And as you know, Richard, you and I have talked about this, but one of the greatest joys of my life over the last, 4 or 5 years has been to get to know Charis and to come to the campus many, many, many times and teach. And I really don't know of a ministry anywhere in terms of evangelism, world missions, and Christian education. I really don't know of any ministry in the world that God is using as much as Andrew and Charis. And so I feel profoundly honored to be just a kind of a small part of the mix. But I want to encourage everybody to pray, to stay tuned and learn from this incredible ministry, this incredible man of God, but to support prayerfully and financially, because God really, really is using all of Andrew and Charis to evangelize the world and fulfill the Great Commission.
Wow, thank you, Alex. That's high praise indeed. Well, Alex teaches in our practical government school. That's how I met him. And I tell you, not to beat a dead horse or self-promote, but the quality of the education that the students in that practical government school get is I guess I like this phrase, Karen, mind-blowing, because people like Alex and many others, Bill Federer, David Barton, and numerous others come in and teach not only from a theoretical perspective, but from real-life lessons. And the quality of that education is just fantastic. Well, Alex, you've been on our show before, but what's new in your ministry? What have you been up to in the last few months?
Well, actually writing a book. In addition to teaching some of my courses for Charis that we have taught online through Zoom, and doing a lot of radio interviews. A lot of people have been asking me, with COVID and then the riots and the rise of Black Lives Matter and so many things going on. I've done a lot of media interviews, but over the last 45 days, I wrote a book called Assault on America. And this morning I was on a show with Eric Metaxas. Do you guys know Eric Metaxas?
I know who he is. I haven't had the honor yet, but I know who he is.
Yeah, he wrote a book a few years ago on Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And then he wrote a book called If You Can Keep It, which is a book, as the founders were coming out of Independence Hall in Philadelphia in 1787, somebody asked Benjamin Franklin, who was at the time, I believe, 74 years old, the oldest member of the Constitutional Convention. They said, "Sirs, what type of government have you given us, a monarchy or a republic?" And Benjamin Franklin said, "A republic, if you can keep it." And what he meant by that was some of the things necessary for the maintenance of a representative republic are religion and morals, faith and virtue. At any rate, we'll come back to that. But I was on a show this morning with Eric Metaxas, and he wrote this book about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And Bonhoeffer was killed by the Nazis during the time of Adolf Hitler. He was a Christian pastor and a very vocal opponent of the rise of the Third Reich. And I said something this morning that I've come to believe over the last 45 days writing this book, The Assault on America. I said, and folks, listen to this. I believe America of 2020 is very similar to Germany in the early 30s during the time of the rise of Adolf Hitler. I think America of 2020 is more like Germany in the 30s rather than America in 1776. And I write about it in this book that's coming out just in about 2 weeks, The Assault on America, What We Must Do to Save Our Country. And guys, God's allowed me to write 17 previous books. This is the most important book. I've got things in this book you will not hear anywhere else about the true platform of the liberal progressives, how we're witnessing an attempted Marxist takeover of America. So when I was on the show this morning and I said to Eric Metaxas, I think that we're a lot like France in the 18th century before the French Revolution, Germany in the 1930s before the Nazi overthrow. And Eric Metaxas, respected historian, best-selling author, he said, I can't believe you said that because that's what I've been saying. And Metaxas this morning said, some of my friends think I'm a little bit over the top, but we, folks, apart from the intervention of God and the citizenship of good folks like everyone watching, praying, influencing, voting, we stand in danger of losing our Constitution and therein losing our liberties and our freedoms. So look, I love the Lord. I'm absolutely secure in Christ. I don't mean to be doom and gloom, but I'm very much a realist. And we must have a restoration of America, or we stand to lose everything we've taken for granted now for 240 years plus.
Wow, Alex. Well, that is a powerful statement. And I'm wondering what it is that we have in common with pre-World War II Nazi Germany. One of the things.
Oh, great question. Great question.
Why don't you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, for one of the things, the church that is called to be salt and light, and the church really in every age, at least to a degree, is to be countercultural. Now, we are to be, salt and light, and Jesus ate with publicans and sinners, and we're to make friends with a lost world so that we can share Jesus. I get that. But the church in Germany was very visible, but completely not influential. And in America right now, we have 345,000 churches and 500,000 ordained clergy. And yet, where is the spiritual power? The church in Germany was very impotent to stand against Hitler. They were either afraid or they seemed powerless. And the church in our country right now, we are highly visible, but less influential. And so we're that way. But also, there was lawlessness, and there was lack of knowledge of history. There was revision of history. And we're witnessing this. And oh my goodness, just about 2 weeks ago, there was a call among some teachers' unions that there be a statute of limitations on history. Now, think about this, folks. We've witnessed the pulling down of statues, the erasure of history, and the revision of history. Now, some of the teachers' unions are saying that we don't teach anything pre-1960. Because, hey, who needs that? I mean, it's such a busy world. Let's teach 1960 and forward. And then in 5 years, we'll teach 1965 and forward. And folks, listen, Edmund Burke was a colonial leader. He said two things that I want to repeat. One, and I bet you've heard Bill Federer say these, but they're good quotes. One, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Think about it. The other thing is, Burke said, that which we obtain too easily, we esteem too lightly. And so for so many young people that they've got this America that's, prosperous and affluent, but they don't know what it took to give us this free, safe, prosperous nation. They don't know about the winter at Valley Forge. They don't know the courage and just the absolute miracle it was that we broke from Britain and were able to engage in self-government. And I fear that in our lifetime, we will witness the loss of something that in the scheme of world history has been utterly, utterly unique. And folks, we've got to, with God's help, muster the courage to speak against socialism, speak against anarchy and lawlessness. And we must return a moral foundation and, frankly, respect for law and authority, or we're going to digress into anarchy and really be ripe for control and takeover by the powers that be.
Wow. Well, Alex, you mentioned the church kind of being lukewarm or asleep, acquiescing to the powers that be. And I'm wondering what other parallels you might see. I don't want to go on all night about this, but one thing that I see in pop culture is I see liberals here today calling conservatives Nazis, like calling Donald Trump a Nazi. But if you understand history, at least in my opinion, the modern day progressives are much more Nazi-like than Donald Trump or the typical conservatives. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. And by the way, thank you for devoting some time to unpack these things. You know, for one thing, for 6,000 years, the world has had this knowledge of morality from Moses on Mount Sinai around 1440 BC up through Israel under King Solomon. Even the Greeks, Aristotle, and the Greeks, the Gentiles that didn't have Exodus chapter 20, even so, they knew the moral code written on everybody's heart. You know, famously in history, the question was asked, what concord hath Athens with Jerusalem? Well, a lot, at least in this regard. Both Jerusalem and Athens recognize this moral code. Nowadays, folks, if you assert morality, that, you know, sex is to be between a husband and a wife, procreation is heterosexual, male and female. I mean, if you even assert a binary view of gender, that there are X, Y, you know, females and males, all right, you're called a hater, you're called heterosexist, you're called transphobic, you're called homophobic. So here is another way that we're analogous to Germany. All right, in Germany, one of the ways that Hitler came to power was things that were false were repeated over and over and over. And lies, if repeated often enough, become the narrative. But something else was, you know, there were the Jews in Germany that while they weren't Christian, they were Jewish, but they still shared the moral code that Christians believe. And then there were a lot of clergy. There were Jewish people that converted to Christianity and became Protestant ministers. Well, the opponents to the worldview of Hitler, the master race, you know, we are the master race, and we will exterminate others that are different and that disagree. Well, they were demonized, and they were part of the problem. And there was the purge, Kristallnacht, and the arresting and the begun systematic killing of the Jews. Look, do you understand? It's not that the liberal progressives have better ideas. I mean, clearly, socialism fails. It never works. The Great Society programs of LBJ from the 60s to the present day, folks, what has the liberal utopianism given us? Poverty, the breakdown of the family, an illegitimacy rate that's beyond 62 to 65%. All right. But yet, any of us, from the president, the vice president, people like Franklin Graham, Andrew, Dr. Dobson, myself, Tony Perkins, any of us that advocate for not only lawfulness, but Christianity, we're haters, we're phobic, we're Nazis. And Antifa, that ostensibly is against fascism, they are the fascists. Controlling viewpoint discrimination. One last thing, guys, and I want to say this. All right, Twitter won't allow any political advertising anymore. But what political advertising means is a very nebulous term. They've got left-leaning organizations that are appointed fact checkers. When John Lewis, the civil rights leader, a Democrat from Georgia, died about a month ago. I wanted to post something very complimentary. He was the last living person that spoke on the Mall in Washington with Dr. King in 1963. And I typed up, "May God bless the sacred memory of John Lewis." He was a Christian, as far as I know, and he did stand for the right things. I was not even allowed to post on Facebook or Twitter a message praising the late John Lewis. Why? Because I'm a conservative, and because the Google bot and Facebook and Twitter, they know that I've posted pro-conservative things. So I get this warning message from Facebook. It says, "You cannot post anything political until you go through our sensitivity training."
Wow.
So we're living in a time, folks, where big tech is listening. And one of the ways I happen to know this, I'll say this and I'll break, sorry. If you type these words in Google or one of the social media platforms, "A man is not a woman and a woman is not a man," your accounts will get flagged and monitored. So that's the tenuous world we're living in now, folks.
Well, the infringement on ideas and free speech and freedom of religion is something that both the Nazis and the communists, all tyrants really, have in common. And we're seeing a great increase in that in our country today, based on, you just open up the Fox News or any other news site and you'll see it there. But Alex, I'm wondering if there's anything positive that you see in our culture today, any reason for hope, signs of life, if you will, or possible signs of revival or awakening?
Absolutely. I don't know if you've seen in several parts of the country, there have been some prayer gatherings, and I think the Holy Spirit is on the move to energize the church. In Huntington Beach, California, for several weeks, there have been a revival meeting that they estimate some 3,000 people have met on the beach, and people are being saved. People are praying. In the Midwest, I've heard about a couple of prayer revivals that are starting up. But just a little example today, I was at the store to pick up a few things, and I was in line, and I was talking to a lady in front of me, and she said that, total stranger, by the way, but she said, "I've never voted." This lady was in her 70s. She said, "I've never voted before because I thought it would not do any good, but I'm voting this time." And she said, and it was because of the riots and the unrest. She said, "I just feel like I have to vote that we would have candidates that would support law enforcement and police." And so let me say this, folks, please don't be complacent and please don't be apathetic. But Richard and everybody, I believe there is a silent majority not represented by the polls. And I think there are enough people that are saying, okay, look, time out. We cannot digress into anarchy. We've got to rein this thing in. So I am very hopeful. I'm also very prayerful. And believe me, folks, we need to, there are a lot of people on the bubble, and I think we need to speak a word of encouragement to them to prayerfully, really consider. And it's not hard to figure out what candidates and what parties represent Americanism, patriotism, and lawfulness, and which don't. So I am encouraged ultimately, but there's a lot of praying and a lot of work to do over the next 4 months.
Well, Alex, one of the, it seems like the 2016 election was not very long ago, but I think that's because it's been such an incredibly intense 4 years of relentless attacks on Donald Trump. And I remember back then people saying, the choice could not be clearer between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and the propositions that they stood for. It seems like that's true all over again this time around, except maybe if it were possible that the Democrats have even outdone themselves again in terms of how left wing and socialist their nominees are. Do you have any thoughts about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and what's at stake in this election?
I do, and Richard, and I've got a
Karen.
document here. I'm sorry, say again.
Karen.
Karen, I'm sorry. I beg your forgiveness. I know your name because I remember we were on one time and you were there in the studio, and I apologize, Karen, but you guys are so gracious. I've got a document in my hand, and there are 21 points that the Biden-Harris campaign plan for you and for me. Now, this is not what you're going to hear in their Heartland America commercials, but listen to this, folks. 21 things they plan to do if they win, and this will happen beginning in 2021. One, now listen, folks, I've got this on good authority, to give citizenship and voting to 12 to 15 million illegals right away. Another thing, to give voting rights to 2 million convicted felons, and even allow voting by felons that are currently incarcerated. Now, when I first was shown this list about a month ago, and I began to research it and write it, even some of my most conservative friends said, oh, this is impossible. This is way over the top. And then last week, an audio tape was on television, on national TV, Joe Biden's own words saying, we're going to give voting rights to 12 million illegals. Now, another part of this, the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens to own firearms. It's interesting. If you're a convicted felon in America, you cannot legally own a firearm and you cannot vote. Well, the Biden campaign, if elected, they're going to give voting rights to the felons and take away gun ownership rights from law-abiding citizens. Now you might ask, why would they want a compromised culture, vulnerable? Over the weekend, something like 100 911 calls went unanswered in Chicago because what police are even there are busy trying to put out riots that have gone on for nearly 80 days. In Portland, maybe you saw in the news this morning about a man that was trying to get away from the rioters, wrecked his car. He was dragged from the car, beaten mercilessly, given a roundhouse kick to the head, and noisy, his head banged into the ground. They can't even rein it in. Now you think, why would people who love America want that? They don't love America. And when the culture is in a perpetual, unending state of tailspin and upheaval, that's all the more easily the Marxists can control this country. And so, again, there is an answer. Number one, pray. Number two, stay informed by watching shows like Truth and Liberty. Number three, be registered to vote and get out and vote. But then influence others. And but guys, I mean, I've got some of these things. One thing that the Biden campaign will do if elected, they will make Election Day a federal holiday. And so all these people that are on the till anyway will be off on Election Day. They will abolish, or they will attempt to abolish, the Electoral College, which is, again, another part of the genius of the vision of the founders. So it's not just the brute majority count of the popular vote. The Electoral College disperses the electoral votes throughout the country, so it really is an equitable, fair election. That this goes back to the Clinton years when Hillary was in charge of trying to implement socialized medicine back in the 90s. They wanted to abolish the Electoral College even as far back as that. So guys, I'll say this, and I'll throw to you guys. In June of 2019, Vice President Pence said it, and it really is true, that the next election, which is now really only 3 months away, it's not so much a contest between two different candidates, it's between two vastly different futures. And that's really true, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Very true. Well, Alex, You mentioned Truth and Liberty and the great things that God is doing here, but you've got your own radio program. I'd like for you to tell the viewers how they can listen to you on radio or maybe podcasts or something like that.
Oh, well, thanks. And, I've done my radio show whenever I'm at Charis to teach. It's been my privilege to broadcast from the campus. We're in our 11th year of doing a show called Exploring the Word. And it's heard Monday through Friday on the American Family Radio Network, AFR. And we're heard all over the country, 230 some stations. And it's a live Bible call-in show. And then Monday, Wednesday, Fridays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on my Facebook page, Rev Alex McFarland, R-E-V, Rev Alex McFarland. We started this during the quarantine. We're doing this 5, 6, 7 minutes at the most, just a webcast. We answer questions. We do a lot of things on there, cover worldview issues. But Richard and Karen, let me say a word about the Worldview Project, the Biblical Worldview Project we're doing with Charis and Andrew. May I say a word about that?
Please do, yeah.
Well, I guess a year ago, actually, I was at the ministry with Andrew Womack, and Bill Federer was there, and just a lot of different people. Bill Redmond was there, Congressman Bill Redmond from New Mexico. And we did a biblical worldview teaching series on human sexuality. What is male and female, God's design for marriage. And I mean, it was pretty compelling stuff. So Andrew has a vision for creating this incredible library of content. What does God's word say? Oh my goodness, everything from a biblical response to racism, a biblical response to socialism, a biblical response to politics, economics, government, the family, child rearing. How do you become a Christian? How do you share the gospel? How do you defend the gospel? A Christian response to atheism. So what we've started doing, and it genuinely is the thrill of my life to be working on this with a very wonderful brother named Mike Pickett and Carrie Pickett. We're working with Andrew to create, and frankly, I think it'll take a number of years. We're going to film this fall. We're going to film next year. I believe we are linking arms together to create kind of this ultimate library of content that will be searchable, videos, audios, printed material, that you can learn a biblical worldview. And listen to this, you can learn to share your faith confidently in every situation.
Wow.
If you want to be able to lead an atheist to Christ, we're going to train you how to do that.
Wow.
If you want to share the gospel and the Christian worldview, we're going to be able to do that. And I'm just so honored to kind of be a little part of the equation of getting this created.
Yeah, well, the truth is you're too humble. You're leading the charge on this for Andrew in creating that content. And folks, you can find that to the first installment of Biblical Worldview Curriculum on awmi.net. Just go to the website and type in Biblical Worldview, and I think you'll find a link for it there. So nobody better to head that project than Alex McFarland. Well, Alex, this has been incredible, but I'm looking at the screen here, and we've got a lot of questions coming in. I want to make sure we give time for folks to hear from you and get their questions answered. So Karen, I'll turn it over to you now.
Great. We are getting a lot of questions, a lot of things that you're making us think about, Alex and Richard. So here's one question that's coming in from Johnny Fickert, who has joined us in chat. And he says this: how do we start revealing these truths inside the church? Our kids are getting pulled into BLM and LGBTQ. What can we do about this?
Oh, great question. And thank you for asking that. Let me say this to the pastors, and I've pastored before. I was a youth pastor 11 years, been a senior pastor a couple of times over the last 25 years. 74% of parishioners want their clergy to speak to moral, social, political issues from a biblical worldview, but only about 11 maybe 12% of pastors do. And Barna, and I'm sure you all know the Barna Research Group, George Barna, very respected sociologist and pollster. And these numbers are pretty recent, so might fluctuate a little bit, 1 or 2 percentage points. But the bottom line, 3/4 of parishioners are wanting their priest or their clergy to speak to these issues. So brother pastors, Sunday school teachers, church staff, church leaders, I beg of you to lovingly but clearly speak about what's going on. And like I say, about 11 or 12% actually do. The Bible says the fear of man brings a snare. And I've had pastors say to me, well, if I really lay the cards on the table, if I really, preach against sin and call out,
Well, it looks like we've lost Alex for a second. There
iniquity
he
and
is.
darkness, me. Don't worry what people say. Am I there?
You are here.
He's
Can you hear
back.
me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for one thing, in the church, the clergy must speak up. We really must. And I think we have to disciple kids as well.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Okay, this question is coming in from Truth 2020 in chat. And the question is, with Joe Biden appearing as unstable as he is, does he really have a chance to win?
Wow, that's a great question. And let me just say this. I can honestly say I pray for Joe Biden and his wife. I prayed like every day for Obama and his family because we want them to know the Lord. And while we vehemently stand against some philosophies and political positions, let's do remember to love these people as human beings and to care about these people and to pray for their soul. Nevertheless, I do not think that he has the physical stamina and, frankly, even the cognitive abilities to run the free world, to be the leader of the free world right now. And we all misspeak, and we all say things, and get some facts incorrect at times, and we have to correct ourselves. But look, I think it's clear to most everybody that Biden is beyond his prime physically and cognitively. But I think, look, we all, he might be the face or the brand. He will not be the president. So is there a chance he could win? Absolutely, there's a chance he could win. If we are apathetic and if Christians and conservatives don't vote. And so we've got to pray. And I think God will bless if we pray for him. Look, we wish them no ill. Of course not. To love our neighbor, we wish God's best and salvation for even those with whom we vehemently disagree. We love them and care about them as a human being made in God's image. But would it be right for us to stand by and let them destroy the country? Of course not at all. I don't think he has what it takes to lead the country. But what scares me is the hyper liberal people around him that actually will be making the decisions. They do have what it takes to hijack this nation. One person said to me this, and I'll conclude this particular answer. I've got a number of friends that are intensely political, deeply informed in Washington. They say Kamala Harris makes Obama look like a conservative. Think about that.
Wow, that's radical.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that is a great answer, Alex. This question is coming in from Baal Leo. I hope I pronounced that correctly, who's watching us on YouTube. And the question is, do you see any hope that media and big tech companies could be turned around?
Wow, that's a great question. Do you know, I think that big tech, and when you think about it, Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and so many of the tech titans, Mark Zuckerberg, I mean, they've got so much money. It's just unthinkable. A lot of people talk about George Soros funding, things like Black Lives Matter and Marxism, which he may. But the fact is, I mean, there are tech titans like Bill Gates that, they are many times more wealthy than even George Soros. So the language that major corporations like Facebook and Google, and Facebook and Google and Instagram and Twitter, I mean, they're all just one big corporation anyway. But think about this. Dollars and cents is the only language they really understand. And so as more Christians and conservatives go to different platforms, like one conservative platform that does not discriminate against viewpoints and does not censor, and we are living in the age of censorship. But Parler is a famous one that more and more people are gravitating to. And of course, people are getting their news from great outlets like Truth and Liberty rather than being wedded to things like MSNBC or CNN.com. There are Christian wire services, Christian Press and CBN News and One News Now, which is a Christian wire service. And these things are really good. But to really actually get their attention, we're going to have to, divest ourselves from these platforms. I will say this: I've heard of people now. I've heard the word, tech vegan, like meaning not vegan in the sense of avoiding meat, but a tech vegan is saying, "Look, I'm not going to do social media, not going to play anymore." And really, I think that's a good thing. I know we all need email and we all need a cell phone, but I really think as Christians, and I'm going to speak for those that are believers in Jesus right now, one of the great realities of being a follower of Christ is the concept of stewardship. And we know about money, being a steward of God's money. But let's remember time. We all have 168 hours in a week. And the Bible says, on average, if God blesses us, we'll have 70, 75 years. Some less, some more. But time is a resource that cannot be recovered once it's lost. And I just shudder to think of the time that is wasted on social media, not only time that can't be recovered, but the social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook are against everything that a Christian would stand for, generally speaking. So will the tech titans turn? I don't know, but I know I can turn and I can wave goodbye to them, and I can invest my time in things that are more profitable for my own intellectual growth and for the spread of the gospel.
Hey, Alex, I wanted to jump in and ask you kind of a academic question here just a little bit. You're talking about censorship and the growth of censorship in American culture, which is increasing as the biblical worldview culture is decreasing. Freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of religion are all Christian principles that come out of the Bible, really. How is that? Why is it that Christianity produces freedom?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me reference an author that I really love. His name is Rodney Stark, Stark. He's a PhD at Baylor, and he's a twice Pulitzer-nominated historian. And he wrote a couple of books on the spread of Christianity throughout the Western world. Jesus was crucified, he rose from the dead, Pentecost came, and by 323, the Roman Empire, which had been very anti-Christian, by 323 under Constantine, Christianity became the official religion of Rome. And of course, the gospel is spread throughout the world. Along comes in around 1132, British common law that was based largely on the Ten Commandments. And cultures where Christianity spread, there were two things that Stark documents, folks. Now listen very carefully. For one is self-restraint under not only the Ten Commandments, but the law of God written on every heart. And so when people control themselves and they decide that, gee, practicing morality and virtue is a good thing, there was less need for law enforcement. And generally, people think about it as they become self-restrained, allowing the Spirit of God and the law of God to rein in human passions. People became able to work a job and save their money and build a marriage, and they love their spouse. And wherever Christianity went, it caused, let's just call it prosperity, less need for law enforcement, less poverty, less people that were just homeless and in the street. But the other thing, and Stark documents this, now listen very carefully, folks, because this is very applicable to our culture. Christianity says, love your neighbor. Christianity also says that before we were in our mother's womb, God knew us. The Bible says we're fearfully and wonderfully made. Read Psalm 139. And so in the Roman Empire, where life was very cheap and elderly people were let out in the wilderness to die, they were non-producers. They couldn't work. They ate, but they didn't pay their way. Everybody wants a son. So female infants were very often thrown on the garbage heap and left to die. Christians, and many other people, the late D. James Kennedy documented this, Jerry Newcomb, Rodney Stark, a lot of people. But listen, Christians that believe all people are made in the image of God, imago Dei, they would rescue the elderly. They would care for the sick and the dying. They would raise the orphan children. And Christianity won the Roman Empire, says Stark, because of the strength of the family. There were Christian families that would grow to 13, 17, 20 people in one family. Why? Because listen, when I honor you, love you, care for you, I'm honoring the one whose image you bear. And I love how Rodney Stark said this in one of his books. He said, Christianity won because it's just a better way to live. And so we get through the Magna Carta, we get through William Bradford and the Plymouth Colony, and finally we get to the Declaration of Independence and the US Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It was Christianity. And I'll say this, in January of '61, when JFK was being inaugurated, John F. Kennedy said, the rights of man come not from the state, but from the hand of God. So it was Christianity that gave the world morality, order, prosperity, and ultimately the second greatest nation right behind Israel under King Solomon, the United States of America.
Wow.
Wow.
Awesome. Eloquent. Karen, we have any more questions?
Alex. All right. So we've got Alice Joy on YouTube who's got this question. Attorney General Barr and the judicial branch seem really critical now. Can you give us some thoughts on that?
Well, great question. Well, the judicial branches of our government are very critical. That's why I applaud Karas's School of Practical Government. And that's why I applaud the fact that Karas is grooming people to run for office, Christians and conservatives. Do you know, it was a judge in California, a Trump appointee, that sided with Pastor John MacArthur and Grace Community Church, that was being threatened with arrest if they had church. I mean, it's amazing how the judicial branch is critical, because while the founders originally envisioned the judicial branches to uphold law, actually, as we all know, from the Supreme Court down to circuit courts and appellate courts, the judicial branches have really become legislative bodies. And I'll explain something, folks. There are a number of ways to look at law. And one is what the founders did, called natural law. Now listen very carefully, and what I'm about to say might be the most important thing I say all night. The rights of man, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. What was originally intended were natural common rights that all people would have. A penumbra, or a grouping of rights, are rights that exist, undeniable natural law: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Now, what's been happening as we've deviated from a natural law, universal absolute truth known to all people, we've gone to what we call case law, where today's decision is just based on the most recent previous decision. And with gay marriage, well, not only the right to redefine marriage, but the right to unrestricted abortion. And now transgenderism is almost classed as an ethnicity, not because of this penumbra of natural rights, but this grouping of special, artificial, I would say, contrived rights. How can we, for all we know, within the next few years, there could be a Supreme Court decision saying that, I'm going to marry my couch or marry my dog. My dog needs health care. Hey, you watch. Universal health care for pets will come down the pike. And things like polyamorous unions and polygamy and pederasty, marrying minors. Why? Because look, once you open the Pandora's box, and anybody, if they get enough signatures on their petition, can demand some special manufactured right, there's really no limit to where this could go.
Alex, I've got to jump in here. Sorry to interrupt you. Fantastic knowledge and information. Where else can you get this quality of analysis? Fantastic. Thank you so much. Again, your website, for if folks would like to buy a copy of your new book, I think it's alexmcfarland.com. So
Right.
folks, I really encourage you to get this book. It's going to be great. I haven't read it yet, but I will. And just knowing Alex, I can endorse it wholeheartedly. Plus, he has a whole host of other resources that you might want to check out, like how to respond to atheists and apologetic resources and all kinds of things. So be sure to go to Alex's website. And I want to thank you again, brother, for coming on the show. Karen, thank you for hosting tonight. It's been a great program. And everybody, I want to also remind you that we'll be on again next week on Monday night at 6 p.m. In the meantime, be sure to check out our resources on truthandliberty.net. Be sure to look at iVoter Guide and also My Faith Votes as we're getting close to the election. If you need information on candidates and that sort of thing, those resources are fantastic. We know these folks personally. And Alex was talking about getting off of Facebook. Truth and Liberty also has a 24/7 news feed that you can get your latest news from that. So encourage you guys to do that. And again, tune in next week for the Truth and Liberty livecast at 6 p.m. Mountain Time and 8 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be a great program. And be sure to pray for America, pray for our president, pray for our leaders, and pray for Alex McFarland, because he's a real warrior for Christ. God bless you guys. Thanks for watching.
God bless.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net. Truth and Liberty is viewer supported. If you'd like to help us continue our live casts, you can make a donation at truthandliberty.net.